The scripture this morning is from 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 through 11. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all times, at all times, in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. And as it is written, they have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. Now, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed, and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through use, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God.
How much is enough? Pretty simple question. You always get asked this question, right? You're sitting at the dinner table. At least I did. Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa. Somebody would lean over and say, "Did you get enough to eat?" How much is enough? We go through our working life. We make some money. And then retirement's coming. And you should save, you should have something in there. How much? How much is enough? Or time. Time's a big one. We use the reasoning. Well, I didn't have enough time to do that, to do this. Well, how much would have been enough? See, it's one of those questions that is very simple, but it's the hardest to answer. And so, over the next several weeks, we're going to start a brand new series. This is 2017 after all. Brand new year, so we're going to start a brand new series, and the name of the series is A Better Me. Because after all, it's the season for resolutions. It's the feeling of a new year. We're getting ready to start new things, and so I felt it was appropriate that we talk about some of these things, and we're going to focus in on a couple of those areas that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And today, we're going to talk about money. Everybody say, yippee! Yippee! So glad you're excited. Now, if my day's thrown off a bit, you can understand why. See, I didn't have water in my mini fridge because I left all of the waters Rachel bought at home, and so we're working with Tropical Punch Kool-Aid Jammers this morning. So if I seem to step off, that's the reason. Yeah. We're going to be in Luke chapter 12 for the majority of the day. So if you have the Bible, I encourage you to go to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. Jesus is talking here. If you have an old school Bible, I don't know if it's in the Pew Bibles or not, but the letters written in red, those are the ones that Jesus spoke, and as recorded by the gospel writers. And so we're going to be reading a lot of what Jesus spoke, which is really a profound thing, I think, if you take a minute to think about it. We're going to be in Luke chapter 12, starting with verse 13, and we're going to try and discover some things about the abundant life. Everybody say abundant. Abundant. And so we're going to try and discover some things about that. Luke chapter 12, verse 13, if you missed it the first 4 times I told you. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable. He says, the ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, build bigger ones. There I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you'll have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then you will get what you've prepared for yourself. This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. So, here it is. Jesus is out talking, teaching, preaching, and this guy comes up who wants a little bit of money. His brother apparently is not dividing the inheritance properly. Anybody have family spats and your brother or sister doesn't handle things quite the way you think they should handle them? Don't raise your hand in case they're here. And you get a little peeved about that, and so this guy comes up to Jesus, who's a rabbi, and this is customary for that time. Rabbis kind of help settle some legal differences, and the guy comes up to Jesus. He says, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Jesus says, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he turns to everybody else and he says, watch out for the greedy ones. We don't hear from Inheritance Boy again. Watch out for the greedy ones. Then Jesus tells a story, which he does a lot of times to illustrate a point that he's trying to make. He says, certain rich man, he produced a good crop. He had a good crop, bumper crop, abundant crop, extra crop. He thinks to himself, what am I going to do with all this extra? I know. I'm going to tear down the barns and storehouses that I have. I'm going to build bigger ones. And then we'll be in good shape. Store everything, have it put away for a rainy day, and then I can take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Now, if you're just reading that very quickly, you think, well, what's wrong with this? I mean, there's nothing wrong with saving, is there? No. Nothing wrong with planning ahead, is there? No. So what's the problem? Well, if you look back to Luke 12, to this section of the parable that Jesus is telling, I want you to notice something. It says, verse 17, what shall I do? I have no place. Verse 18, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, build bigger ones there. I will store all my grain and my goods, and I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Did you notice all the personal pronouns? I, me, my, myself, mine. Then Jesus says, God will say to this guy, look, your life's going to be demanded of you, and then who gets what you got? You got all these plans, then who's going to get what you have? All this stuff you worked so hard for. And Jesus said, this is what it's going to be like for those who are not rich toward God. So there's not anything wrong with planning, not anything wrong with saving. In fact, that's advocated elsewhere throughout Scripture, including Jesus himself. But there is the issue of being selfish, greedy. Goes back to that first question that we started with. Goes back to all of that. Now here's an interesting thing, right? The certain rich man, this farmer, who produced a good crop, we don't know how long he had been a farmer. Maybe he had been a farmer, we know he'd been a farmer for at least over a year, because he already had barns and storehouses and things like that. And so those barns and storehouses had been good enough. Right? In all the years that this certain rich man had produced a crop, those barns and storehouses had done what they needed to do. They had filled and emptied and filled and emptied and filled and emptied. And yet when the time came and this certain rich man was blessed with an abundant crop, he didn't necessarily trust that those barns would be enough. He wanted to build bigger ones. It's interesting. Earlier on in the text, Jesus says, watch out for the greedy ones, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Jesus says the life isn't in the abundance. And the interesting thing is, the word for abundance there kind of lends itself to the horticultural world. It's this idea of a bud, the bud of a plant or a flower. You know, it's very small, very green. And the abundance is when that bud blooms. Like this over the top. You've got it in your picture. You've seen the slow-mo video capture stuff on the Discovery Channel of a flower opening up, right? It's this abundance, right? It's really interesting to me that everything that a flower grows into is included within a seed or a pod. All of the stem, all of the leaves, all of the seeds and plant, the petals and the stamens and any other horticultural term you can think of. It's all included in that one little. And so you could say that daisy, it's all included. It's all right there. That little is a daisy, for all intents and purposes. The same could be said for humanity, right? You have a fertilized egg, and everything that is needed is in that egg. That egg will grow, and it'll change shape, and it'll develop personality, and it'll develop an attitude, and then it starts driving a car, and then it goes off to college, and then it drops out of college, and then it goes to college again, and then it drops out again, and then it gets pregnant, and then it gets married, and then it retires, and then it dies. Everything that was needed for life was in that little fertilized egg. And everything that follows after that is abundance. It's extra. Icing on the cake. Gravy on the biscuit, whatever terminology you want to use. See, Jesus said that a man's life is not found in the abundance, but he seems to entail that the life is in what God has provided. See, the certain rich man's problem was not the building of bigger barns. God doesn't have a problem with bigger barns. It wasn't in that he produced a good crop. It's that he began to trust his crop more than he trusted the God who gave it to him. His thought process was, I'm not going to keep believing that God's going to provide. Instead, I'm going to hoard this for me, for myself, for my desires, for my easy life. There's never a mention of a family in this parable. There's never mention of, I'm going to give some away because I've been blessed with this abundance so that I can bless other people. It's never any of that. In this parable, in this instance, it's all about me. Make life easy. All about me. You remember the Israelites? No? Okay. So this is going to go about a half hour longer than I planned. The Israelites, Exodus, right? Egypt, Moses. This starts coming to you. Give me a nod, okay? Yeah. Over 1 million people. Let my people go. No. Let my people go. No. Let my people go. Okay. And they go. There were some more things, more theatrical things, but we don't have time for that. Moses is leading his people, the Israelites, across the desert, and they've experienced incredible things. The plagues, of course. They've experienced deliverance from Passover. That was a big deal. Even just walking, they're following a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of what? Fire by night. And they're, incredible. God, GPS. They make their way to the Red Sea. They say, oh no! God says, don't worry about it. They cross over on dry land. The Egyptians go, oh, now we got them. They're racing on chariots. Yeah. They make their way across. God says, Wipes out the whole Egyptian army. The Israelites look back, they've been saved once more. They're traveling across the desert to the promised land, the place where God had prepared for them to be a nation, to be his symbol, to be his light, to be, if I dare use this word in the Old Testament, his future church. We're hungry. What are we going to eat? We're going to have to go back to Egypt because that's what we know and that's what's comfortable and that's what we trust. God does a divine head smack. Gives them manna from heaven. Food falling from the sky. Now there were certain rules with the manna. I don't know if you're aware of this. With the collection of the manna. It came every day, like clockwork. Every morning they wake up, food's all over the ground. They can pick it up, it's good to eat, it's filling. They're supposed to collect just enough for their family, just for that day. And they would have enough. And then when it came to the weekend, when the Sabbath was coming, they weren't supposed to collect anything on the Sabbath, but so the day before, they could collect twice as much, 2 days worth, for their family, for that day, and for the Sabbath. Now here's an interesting thing. If during the week, they tried to collect extra, if they decided, you know what, just in case this whole food from heaven, manna, God-giving thing stops, I'm going to collect a little extra on the side so that I can have a midnight snack, so that I can have a little bit more than my neighbor. If they tried to collect extra, the manna would go rotten. It would spoil. Now that in itself is a miracle because I've already told you that the manna can last for 2 days because God allowed it to happen every time there was a Sabbath coming. Every week the Sabbath would come. The day before they'd gather twice as much. But if they tried to do it on a different day, on a day that God had not ordained or said to do it, then the manna would go bad. See, the problem was not the gathering of extra manna. The problem was the distrust of the God who gave it. So, there's a little boy in the audience today. And he just celebrated Christmas. Now, if you've ever been a little person celebrating Christmas, it is the best thing ever. Would you agree? Yeah. Absolutely. Anytime we go anywhere now, he thinks he's getting presents. So that's a hard one to break. But we celebrated Christmas last week, and we got home from church, and we did our Christmas, Rachel, myself, and Parker, and he opened his presents first. And so we get all the way through his presents, gets to the last present. We save the best for last. I don't know if you do that at your house, but this is the big present, so you save it. And so we got everything ready, got the video ready and go. Okay, Parker, go ahead and open it. He opens it up. This is the coolest toy ever! I just asked for it! And he's just overjoyed, excited. It's a garbage truck. But in his world, hi buddy. In his world, it's the coolest thing ever because it lights up, it talks, and it stands up on the back wheels and all sorts of stuff. Just what I asked for. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day a spouse to wed. Give us this day a roof o'er our head. Give me this day some fun before I'm dead. Is it enough? I mean, that's what you asked for. In fact, you asked for it just today. Is it enough? More importantly, is he enough? Because that's the question that's at the heart of that. And when we think that it's not going to be enough, when what God has provided, we think it's not enough, then we start to worry, don't we? I'm not going to have enough. Or it's not going to be enough. And Jesus addresses this too. If your finger's still in Luke 12, I hope it is, I'm going to pick it back up, verse 22. Jesus just keeps on talking. He says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the lilies grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. Now, if that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today, and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? Do not set your heart on what you'll eat or drink. Don't worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given you as well. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the birds and the bees. No, not that conversation. I'm too young to have that conversation with you. It would just be awkward. Brian's going to come up and give that conversation. Brian, would you? No. You ever thought about birds? How many people have ever seen baby birds perched outside your house in the most inopportune place? Like right outside your front door, you got to walk past it every day. You're afraid a dive-bombing mama is going to come get you every time you go out your house. Yeah, you look out your window, you see those baby birds. What do they look like? Can you show me what a baby bird looks like? Thank you, Greg. The only brave soul in here. Yeah, right? They're standing there. They can't fly. They can't fend for themselves. They're just waiting for mama to come throw up in their mouth. Right? You ever thought about that? That's their sustenance. That's their life. That's their livelihood. That's their all. They are waiting for vomit. And it's enough. They're satisfied with that. Then the day comes, they can actually, they grow because they've trusted in that vomit-giving God. They grow and they're able to fly and move around, and they leave the nest. Then what do? They've graduated from vomit to worms, moving up in the world. So every morning, they go out. And of course, the early bird gets the worm. And so they go out and they smash their head against the ground, digging for worms. They dig through mud and other things that land on the ground just so they can get some slimy, delectable food. And it's enough. Or what about this? We'll talk about flowers. You know how pitiful flowers are? Think about this. Flowers depend on carbon dioxide to grow. So they are living off of your birds. They're dependent on nature, on other things like bees. Bees in themselves are a natural marvel. After all, you ever seen a bumblebee? They're supposed to be relatively safe, but they scare me to death. They're the size of like horses flying through the sky, and you hear them from like a block away. And you look over and I'm gonna go this. Like if you're a guy, you try to be cool. Like I got something to work on over here. But in reality, you're like don't touch me. But a bumblebee's body makes absolutely no sense. It's this big puffy body, these two little wings, And by all measures, it should not be able to get off the ground, and yet it does. And in fact, it gets off the ground so that it can go from flower to flower and collect some pollen on its legs. And then, as it goes to another flower, that pollen from other flowers falls off, and the flower's life cycle is then replenished. It's able to grow. Incredible. Flowers live off of burps and leg dust. And it's enough. And here's the crazy part. They grow better if you put poop on the ground first. That's right. This is a sermon that includes vomit, burps, and poop, all in the same one. And yet I think you're gathering my point, is that the grossest, most bleh things in life are enough for the flowers and the birds. So Jesus says, don't worry about it. What you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, don't worry about tomorrow. You can't add a single hour to your life. Great author named Corrie ten Boom actually said this. She said, worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength. Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength. Yeah. That's good. And it's a lot easier to say than it is to do. Because after all, we live in a world where dads get diagnosed with cancer. And it is so tempting to worry. What's going to happen? Who's going to pay for stuff? What's going to happen to mom? What's going to happen to the guys who are employed? Who's going to have to handle all that? They're going to have to move? Where are they going to move to? How are they going to afford it? What are they going to do with all the stuff? What about? I can't change any of that. Neither can you. But what I can do is trust. Trust in the God who gives us breath. Trust in the God who gives worms to birds and bees to flowers. I can be grateful for the abundance that God has blessed us with. Those moments that happen after the egg has been fertilized. Because if I spend all my time worrying, and you've been around people, and maybe you've been people who worry, if we spend all our time worrying, you just feel drained, paralyzed. What if I do this? That'll be wrong. What if I do this? That'll be wrong. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to sit here and worry about it and feel terrible. Worry doesn't change anything about tomorrow's sorrow. All it does is drain today of its strength. So, there's nothing wrong with planning, nothing wrong with saving, but who is it for? I mean, if the primary problem with the text that Jesus mentioned, if the primary problem with this certain rich man was that it was all about him, then who should the planning and the saving and the preparing be for? Well, thankfully, Jesus addresses this towards the end of Luke chapter 12. So if you're still awake, if you're still with me, if you're still in reach of the Bible, go back to Luke 12. Verse 32. Jesus says, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom." Wow. Right after he says, don't worry, God knows what you need. And if you trust in him, he'll give you what you need and then some. He says, don't be afraid. A little flock. And don't take that demeaning. This is, after all, the good shepherd speaking. And so he's speaking tenderly to his sheep who he cares for. He says, don't be afraid. Because if I'm living a life without worry, that means I'm living a life out of my control. And that's terrifying. He says, don't be afraid. For your Father has been pleased to give you kingdom. You remember the story of the prodigal son? Guy has 2 sons. Youngest son says, Dad, I want you to die, or I want you to give me my half of the inheritance. Father agrees, which is totally uncharacteristic, but he does it. And he gives the younger son his half of the inheritance. Younger son runs off, wild living, la 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 la. Comes back, it looks a lot like New Year's Eve parties. Comes back, and he is very upset. He says, Dad, I can't believe I did this. I'm so sorry. I sinned against heaven, against you. I'm so wrong. Dad. He runs to him, and he's just love and joy and forgiveness and hope. And there's a new day and a better way. And let's throw a party. My son has come home. Remember the other son? The older son? He doesn't join the party. The father goes out to see him, says, what's going on? He says, I've been here the whole time, working hard, serving you, doing what I'm supposed to do. This son of yours runs off, has a good time, comes back, wasted and a mess, and you throw him a party because he came back home. I've been here the whole time, you haven't even given me a goat. A goat. You remember the father's response? He says, my son, everything I have is yours. You've always been here with me. Everything I have is yours. Don't be afraid, little flock, because your Father has been pleased to give you kingdom. Everything I have is yours. So Jesus continues. He says, sell your possessions, give to the poor, provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will not be exhausted, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Does Jesus need to sell everything? Give to the poor? Maybe, maybe not. It's up to your interpretation. I mean, there are elsewhere where Jesus says, hey, be sure to keep this, take this with you. Well, if you sell everything, you're not going to have this to take with you. But maybe it has more to do with being willing to sell everything. Being willing to give to the poor. There's obviously action included in that, but if after all we aren't willing to give up everything, then we're just worried about building bigger barns. We have to live a life with open hands, not just in worship, but when it comes to what God has blessed us with, because he'll put stuff in and he'll take stuff out. But if he's doing that and we're trusting in that relationship and we are wrapped up in that relationship, then we know that if our hand is ever empty, God will fill it. And if it's ever full, he might ask of it. But if we close our hands and close off to him, pour it away, it's mine. You fool. This day your life will be demanded of you, and then who gets what you got? Did you know there are no banks in heaven? I don't really know, I'm just hypothesizing. But I highly doubt there are banks in heaven, and so you're probably not going to be able to do a wire transfer. Probably no ATMs in heaven. Or at the very least, if there are, they won't charge you that $3 fee. You guys know this. You can't take stuff with you. It's given to us to be used for him. Jesus finished up that parable, the story of the rich man. He said, this is how it will be for anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich for God. It's for him. Kate read a passage from 2 Corinthians about giving. And here's the thing about the abundant life. Abundance provides for generosity. Think about this. When you don't have abundance, you don't think about giving to other people. Abundance gives you opportunity to be generous. So, we're in a new year, 2017. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. And everybody's looking at different things. They just wrapped up tax time, you know. All your giving and all that stuff is closing. The books are closing. This is not a plea for you to give to the church, though you certainly can if you choose to do so. This is a plea for you to go to your house, to your budget, to your pocketbook, to your life, and figure out how much is enough. Where do I draw the line? And where am I crossing it? And it's going to be different for everybody, right? It's going to be different. For some people, enough is... Oh, let me give you an example. 20 years ago, how many channels did you have? And here's the question, do you have more today? How much is enough? 20 years ago, was your salary enough to pay for things? If so, where's it at today? 20 years ago, well, you know, how much is enough? For some people, calling their relatives once a week is enough. For some, calling them once a day is enough. For some, calling them once an hour is enough. But that all changes, doesn't it? Stuff happens. And we go, well, I should call them, I should visit them, I should do more. Haven't done it enough. See, abundance provides for generosity, and we've all got plenty of time. Plenty of time. We've all got plenty of money, if you boil right down to it. We've all got plenty of food. We've all got plenty of opportunity. And it's not my place to tell you to cut this and cut that and change this and change that, because even if I tell you, it doesn't matter if you don't do it. So we all have to make that decision and look at our lives, figure out where we draw the line at enough. And then, what do we do with the abundance? What do we get to do with the abundance? Father, today, we come to you and we trust in you for everything. Like baby birds, helpless in a nest. All it takes is one bad cell. All it takes is for one missed beat. All it takes is for one accident. And our fragile life in this nest ends. So let us be grateful for the life that you have provided, thankful for the abundance that we get, the abundance of money, the abundance of years, the abundance of resources and people and friendships and relationships. Let us change our lives from being rich towards us to being rich towards you. And give and serve abundantly. Not because some loudmouth with a microphone said so, but because we want to. We recognize this out of gratitude and love for you. We thank you for Jesus. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen.